Welcome, everyone. If you're the kind of person who's absolutely fascinated by how we learn, how those really complex ideas get broken down into bite-sized pieces, well, you're in the perfect place. Welcome to this explainer. Our goal today? We're going to see exactly how a seemingly simple little storybook chapter called RANI'S Gift managed to teach some surprisingly deep, foundational math concepts. We're talking about unpacking the sheer pedagogical genius that's hiding right beneath the surface of a children's story.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our roadmap for today is pretty straightforward. We'll start with a welcome to RANI'S Gift, move on to the problem with handspans, then balance the fruit seesaw, look at the math of nimbupani, and finally go beyond just measurement.
All right, part 1, welcome to RANI'S Gift and the storybook approach to learning.
So what we've got here is honestly a total masterclass in bypassing those dry, frankly intimidating textbook formats we probably all remember from school. Imagine two whimsical little mice working together to carry this bright yellow ribbon-tied gift. It's so clever because this narrative-driven approach immediately sets a really engaging, non-threatening tone. The student gets completely drawn into this world of characters, and they're perfectly primed to absorb the foundations of measurement without even realizing they're stepping into a math lesson. It's literally stealth learning at its finest.
Moving on to Section 2, the problem with handspans, or the chaos of non-standard units.
And this brilliantly illustrates our first core mathematical pillar, linear measurement, but taught through a completely relatable story. We meet Raja Jagdeep, who commands his carpenter to build him a magnificent bed. And he's very specific. It must be exactly 10 handspans long. But, well, look at the result. The carpenter meticulously measures out 10 of his own handspans, but when the poor Raja actually tries to sleep on it, the bed only measures 8 of the Raja's handspans, so his feet are just left dangling right off the edge.
Let's do a quick pedagogical pullback here for a second. Why did the authors choose to include this specific anecdote? Well, a handspan is what we call a non-standard unit of measure. It's just based on the width of a human hand. By telling the story, the curriculum is actively teaching the inherent flaws and unreliability of non-standard units. Instead of just giving a boring lecture, it's showing the student exactly why a standardized system of measurement is absolutely necessary.
Which, of course, naturally leads us to ask the student, why on earth was it only 8 handspans for the Raja, but 10 for the carpenter? I mean, just imagine trying to measure your own living room furniture using nothing but your hands, right? And then asking a friend who has totally different sized hands to build a slipcover based on those measurements. It would be complete and utter chaos. This little puzzle perfectly sets up the crucial need for standard measurement.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds, balancing the fruit seesaw and our introduction to weight and mass.
Okay, so now we're shifting gears from linear length over to our second pillar of measurement. And the narrative takes this really fun, slightly amusing turn. Picture this. A really heavy watermelon decides he wants to play on a seesaw. So, naturally, he sits on one side and bam, it just slams right to the ground. He's totally stuck. Along comes his lighter mango friend to help out. But one mango just isn't going to cut it. The mango actually has to call on a whole bunch of his friends to sit on the opposite side just to balance out that one watermelon. It brilliantly draws the learner's attention directly to the visual physics playing out right in front of them.
Really think about the massive conceptual leap happening here in the curriculum. We are moving from simple, straight-line linear length, right, into comparing mass between entirely different types of objects. We've got this heavy, singular object, the watermelon, being directly weighed against multiple, much lighter objects, the mangoes. The student is actually being asked to intuitively grasp density and mass correlation.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it acts as a foundational visual equation. The book is essentially asking kids how many mangoes will balance the watermelon, and without them even knowing it, it's teaching the absolute fundamentals of algebraic balancing. The core idea that the value on the left has to equal the total value on the right, and it does this without using a single complex number or algebraic variable. Honestly, it is just brilliant visual scaffolding for the much harder math concepts they'll face down the road.
All right, on to Section 4, the math of nimbupani, where we tackle volume, ratios, and real-world application.
This is where we see how the whole chapter culminates in a real-world application, bringing in volume and proportional reasoning. Here we have the base recipe outlined in the text to prepare exactly 1 glass of nimbupani, which is a super popular, delicious Indian lemonade. It needs 1 glass of water, 1 spoon of sugar, 2 spoons of lemon juice, and a pinch of salt. Now, I want you to start mentally calculating along with me as we prep for the story's next big hurdle.
So, the crucial point here is that the character in our story, Raghu, well, he doesn't just want 1 glass. He wants to make nimbupani for himself and his 2 friends. That means he needs 3 glasses total. And just like that, boom, the student is introduced to the concept of volume multipliers and ratio scaling.
To actually solve the problem, the student has to step up and multiply each specific ingredient by 3. So 1 glass of water, that becomes 3. 1 spoon of sugar also becomes 3. Those 2 spoons of lemon juice multiply to become 6, and that single pinch of salt becomes 3 pinches. The student is executing applied multiplication and preserving ratios, all completely disguised as just hosting a little party for friends. Pretty neat, right?
And that brings us to our final part, Section 5, Beyond Just Measurement, the Holistic Lesson.
So, having successfully established length, weight, and volume, the chapter does something really special. It concludes by stepping right out of the math classroom and into the real world. Listen to this quote straight from the source text. After doing all that math to make the Numbo Pani, the lesson ends with this specific instruction. Discuss the uses and importance of water in our life. Also discuss the proper usage and no wastage of water. The lesson brilliantly and so seamlessly pivots away from proportional equations to instilling vital, real-world ethics about environmental conservation.
What this explainer really highlights is that good pedagogy doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It connects the numbers on a page to the actual world we live in. So I'll leave you with this final thought. How can you apply these foundational lessons of measurement, scale, and conservation in your own daily life? Maybe think about that the next time you're scaling up a recipe for dinner or measuring a room for a new rug. Take a second to appreciate the hidden, really grounded depths of childhood storytelling. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep learning.